My beloved child. Before this day passes, there is something your heart must finally place down. Not tomorrow. Not when you feel stronger. Not after you have solved every problem by yourself. Right now, on this 13th day of July, you are standing at the edge of a quiet moment that may change how you carry the burden no one else can see. You have smiled while a question followed you from room to room. You have answered people kindly while your own thoughts remained unsettled. And last night, when the world became still, one name, one situation, or one impossible need returned to your mind again. You tried to dismiss it, yet something inside you whispered, "Please, let there still be a way." This fictional prayerful story is not asking you to pretend that fear does not exist. It is inviting you to enter a different kind of courage, the courage to speak honestly before God about what hurts, what is missing, and what you can no longer control. Picture a small chapel just before sunrise. The wooden pews are empty. Pale light rests across the floor, and somewhere near the altar stands an image of Saint Anthony of Padua, remembered by generations as a helper in moments of loss. A single candle trembles beside it, though the air is still. A woman enters quietly. Her name is Elena. In her hand is an old envelope, folded at the corners from being opened too many times. Inside is a letter from her younger brother, Daniel, written before an argument separated them nearly 3 years earlier. She knows every sentence by heart, especially the final one, "No matter how far I go, you will always be my home." But Elena no longer knows where Daniel is. She had searched through friends, old addresses, and unanswered messages. Each attempt led to another silence. Eventually, the silence became so painful that she stopped telling people she was still looking. Yet on July 13th, after waking from a dream in which Daniel stood beneath a train station clock, she walked to the chapel before work. She did not ask for something spectacular. She did not demand proof. She simply sat in the last pew and whispered, "God, I have lost more than his location. I have lost the part of myself that believed forgiveness could arrive in time." That confession changed the room. Not because thunder sounded or a voice came from the ceiling, but because Elena finally admitted the truth she had hidden even from herself. She was not only afraid that Daniel would never return. She was afraid that he had returned emotionally long ago and she had been too wounded to notice. Her fingers tightened around the letter. Then she remembered something strange. 6 months earlier, a blank postcard had arrived without a return address. On the front was a photograph of an old station clock. Elena had assumed it was advertising and placed it in a kitchen drawer. But now, sitting beneath the chapel's quiet arches, she could see the same clock from her dream with impossible clarity. She hurried home. The drawer stuck at first, swollen from the summer heat. When it finally opened, receipts and forgotten keys slid forward. Beneath them was the postcard. Elena turned it over, expecting emptiness. This time she noticed faint writing pressed into the paper. Someone had written a message on another sheet placed above it, leaving an imprint behind. Elena held the card near the window and tilted it toward the morning light. Slowly, the hidden words appeared. July 13th. 10 o'clock. I will wait where we said goodbye. Her breath caught. The date was today. She looked at the clock. It was already 9:18. For one frozen second, Elena could not move. Hope felt more frightening than disappointment because disappointment was familiar. Hope required her to risk being hurt again. It required her to believe that the prayer she had whispered only minutes earlier might not be changing the world around her, it might be revealing something that had been waiting for her to see. She grabbed her coat, the letter, and the postcard. The station was across the city. Traffic crawled beneath the bright July sun. Every red light felt personal. As the minutes disappeared, Elena remembered the final argument with Daniel, the slammed door, the accusation neither of them meant, and the unbearable moment when pride became stronger than love. At 9:57, she ran through the station entrance. The great clock hung above the crowded platform exactly as it had in her dream. Travelers moved in every direction. Announcements echoed overhead. Elena searched every face, her heart pounding harder with each passing second. 10 o'clock arrived. Daniel was not there. At 10:03, the crowd thinned. At 10:07, Elena lowered her eyes, ashamed that she had allowed herself to believe so quickly. She pressed the old letter against her chest and whispered, "Saint Anthony, people ask for help finding what is lost. But perhaps some things remain lost because we waited too long." Then someone behind her answered softly. Or perhaps they were finding their way back. Elena turned. A man stood several feet away, older than the brother she remembered. His hair was shorter. Weariness marked his face. But his eyes were unmistakable. Daniel had come. Neither of them spoke at first. Years of anger, regret, and unfinished conversation stood between them like invisible walls. Then Daniel reached into his pocket and removed a small silver medal of Saint Anthony, the same medal their mother had given him as a child. "I tried to contact you," he said. "I sent the postcard, but I lost my courage before I could write the address. I thought you would never understand why I left." Elena's eyes filled, but the biggest revelation had not yet arrived. Daniel looked toward the station doors, where a young girl waited beside a suitcase, holding the hand of an elderly woman. "There is someone you need to meet," he whispered. "And there is something about our family that you were never told." The girl looked up. Around her neck hung the matching half of the silver medal Elena had kept since childhood. And when Elena saw the photograph the girl was carrying, she realized that the person she had been praying to find was only the beginning of what had returned. The station seemed to fall silent, though trains still rumbled across distant tracks and hurried footsteps echoed through the halls. Elena's attention rested only on the little girl. She could not have been more than 8 years old, yet there was a quiet confidence in the way she held the faded photograph, as if she had protected it for far longer than someone her age should have needed to. Daniel walked toward her slowly. "I've wanted this moment for years," he said, his voice carrying the weight of countless unfinished nights. "But I promised I would not arrive until I could tell you the whole truth." The elderly woman standing beside the child nodded gently. Deep lines crossed her face, not from bitterness, but from decades of carrying stories that never found the right time to be spoken. She reached into her handbag and carefully removed a small leather journal tied with a worn blue ribbon. "It belonged to your mother," she whispered. Elena stared at the journal in disbelief. She had searched every corner of the family home after her mother's passing, believing all of her keepsakes had already been found. Yet this book had never appeared. She asked me to keep it, the woman continued. She believed one day your hearts would be ready to read it together, not separately. Daniel lowered his eyes. I didn't understand why she trusted someone outside our family with it. I was angry. I thought she was hiding something from us. I spent years believing she had chosen secrets over honesty. The journal rested between them like a bridge waiting to be crossed. With trembling hands, Elena untied the ribbon. The first pages contained ordinary memories, recipes, birthdays, little sketches from family vacations. But as she turned another page, the handwriting became slower, more deliberate. If you are reading this, their mother's words began, then forgiveness has finally become more valuable than being right. Elena felt those words settle into places inside her heart that had remained locked for years. The next pages revealed something neither sibling expected. Their mother had quietly supported struggling families throughout the city, never telling anyone except the elderly woman who now stood before them. She believed that kindness grew stronger when it was hidden rather than celebrated. Among those families was one whose lives had been changed after a devastating accident. That family had a little daughter. The same little girl now standing beneath the station clock. Daniel looked toward her with unmistakable affection. After the accident, he explained softly, she had no one who could stay with her permanently. Mom asked me to visit. At first I went because she requested it. Then I kept going because I couldn't imagine leaving. The little girl smiled shyly. My name is Sophia, she said. Your mom used to tell me stories about stars that never stopped shining, even when clouds covered them. Elena closed her eyes. She could almost hear their mother's voice speaking those exact words. For years, she had believed Daniel disappeared because he wanted to escape the family. Now she was beginning to understand. He had disappeared because he was quietly keeping a promise no one else knew existed. I wanted to tell you, Daniel admitted, but every month that passed made it harder. I thought you'd only see my silence, not the reason behind it. Before Elena could answer, the elderly woman turned another page of the journal. Folded inside was an envelope addressed to both of them. Its seal had never been broken. Daniel hesitated. I've never opened it. Neither had the woman. Their mother had written one sentence across the front. Please read this only when love has become stronger than pride. Elena carefully unfolded the letter. The first paragraph thanked them for every joyful memory they had shared as children. The second asked them never to measure family by years apart, but by the willingness to return. Then, halfway through the letter, her handwriting changed again. There is one final promise I pray you will keep together. Elena continued reading silently. Her breathing slowed. Daniel watched her face change from confusion, to disbelief, to tears. What is it? He whispered. She looked up slowly. Our mother. Elena said, barely able to speak, planned something for this exact date. Daniel frowned. What do you mean? Elena handed him the letter. At the bottom, beneath her signature, was a handwritten instruction neither of them had expected. If God grants you reconciliation, go together to the old monastery outside the city before sunset on July 13th. There you will receive the final gift I have been preparing for you. No explanation followed. No map. Only one final sentence. You will not find treasure there, but you will discover why every delay in your lives was allowed to unfold exactly as it did. The station clock struck another hour. Daniel slowly folded the letter. Neither of them knew what waited at the monastery. But somewhere beyond the city, as afternoon light stretched across the hills, an old caretaker was already standing beside a locked wooden door, holding a key that had remained untouched for many years, waiting for the moment two separated hearts would finally arrive together. The road to the monastery wound through rolling hills brushed with the golden light of late afternoon. None of them spoke for several miles. The silence was no longer heavy with resentment, it was filled with anticipation, as though every turn in the road carried them closer to a sentence their lives had been trying to finish for years. Elena watched the landscape through the window, remembering childhood journeys when their mother would pull the car over simply to admire a field of wildflowers or listen to birds hidden among the trees. Back then, she never understood why ordinary moments mattered so much to her. Now she wondered whether her mother had been quietly teaching them that the greatest treasures were rarely found in moments of noise, but in places where the heart finally became still enough to listen. When they reached the monastery, the ancient stone walls glowed beneath the setting sun. Time had softened every corner of the building. Ivy climbed across weathered bricks, and a bell tower rose above the courtyard without urgency, as though it had witnessed generations of prayers come and go without ever needing to hurry. Waiting beside the wooden entrance stood an elderly caretaker dressed in simple clothes. His expression carried the peaceful confidence of someone who had spent a lifetime keeping promises. "You came together," he said gently. Neither Elena nor Daniel had introduced themselves. The caretaker smiled before their surprise could become a question. "Your mother told me many years ago that if this day ever arrived, would recognize you without needing names." He reached into his coat and produced an old brass key worn smooth by countless hands. Instead of unlocking the monastery itself, he led them through a narrow stone passage into a quiet garden hidden behind the main building. In its center stood a single olive tree. Its branches stretched wide, offering shade over a weathered wooden bench. "There," the caretaker whispered. "Everything begins there." Beneath the bench rested a small cedar chest. Daniel knelt beside it, fitting the brass key into its lock. The mechanism resisted for a moment before yielding with a soft click. Inside were carefully wrapped bundles of letters, each tied with different colored ribbons. Some were addressed to Elena. Some to Daniel. Others bore unfamiliar names. At the very bottom lay one final envelope. Across its front, in their mother's unmistakable handwriting, were the words, "Open this only after you understand why the others exist." Curiosity pulled at them, but they honored her request. Elena untied the first ribbon. The letter inside had been written to her years before. It did not predict her future or reveal hidden mysteries. Instead, it described the quiet strength she had shown as a child whenever someone felt lonely or forgotten. Their mother wrote that compassion was Elena's greatest gift, but warned that compassion could become exhaustion if she believed she had to carry everyone else's pain alone. Tears filled Elena's eyes. No one had ever described her so completely. Daniel opened his own letter. His mother had written about his restless spirit, his courage to protect others, and the danger of believing that love always required sacrifice in silence. She urged him never to confuse isolation with strength. He folded the page slowly. "I've been living exactly the mistake she feared," he admitted. The caretaker nodded. "She hoped those words would reach you before life taught the lesson more painfully." Then Sophia reached into the chest. Hidden beneath the remaining bundles was a faded photograph. It showed Elena and Daniel as children standing beside another little boy neither of them immediately recognized. The photograph had been taken beneath the same olive tree where they now stood. On the back was a single handwritten sentence. "One day, the three of you will meet here again." Daniel frowned. "There were only two of us." The caretaker's peaceful expression changed ever so slightly. "No," he replied. "There were three." The evening breeze stirred the olive branches overhead. The caretaker looked toward the distant monastery gate, where the sound of slow footsteps echoed across the courtyard. "I prayed," he said quietly, "that he would arrive before sunset." Elena and Daniel turned together. A lone figure was walking toward them, carrying a worn leather satchel across one shoulder. As he stepped into the fading light, Elena felt an unexplainable familiarity. She had never forgotten his face. Because she had never known it. Yet something deep within her heart recognized him before her mind could understand why. The stranger stopped only a few feet away. His eyes rested on the photograph still trembling in Elena's hands. Then, with quiet emotion, he spoke the words that would unravel everything they believed about their family's past. "I've spent my entire life searching for both of you," he said. "Because before your mother became part of your story, she first saved mine." And from inside his satchel, he carefully removed another sealed letter, one their mother had written, but had never intended either Elena or Daniel to find until this very moment. The stranger waited until the last rays of sunlight slipped behind the monastery walls. The courtyard seemed suspended between day and night, as though time itself had slowed to honor a promise made decades earlier. He held the sealed letter with extraordinary care, not like an object, but like something that had quietly shaped every decision of his life. "My name is Gabriel," he said. "Your mother asked me to protect this until the day both of you stood here with hearts willing to forgive." Elena looked at the familiar handwriting on the envelope. Every curve of every letter carried the warmth of someone she had longed to speak with one more time. Yet she hesitated. Some truths change you the moment they are known, and there is no returning to the person you were before. Gabriel understood. "Before you open it," he said softly, "there is something you deserve to know about the day I met her." He gazed toward the hills beyond the monastery. "Many years ago, I arrived here with nothing except fear. I had lost my family in a single season of hardship. I believed my life had no purpose left. Your mother found me sitting outside these gates. She didn't ask what had happened. She simply sat beside me until I found the courage to speak." He smiled through eyes glistening with memory. "People often remember grand speeches. I remember one quiet sentence. She told me, broken people are not abandoned people. Sometimes they become the safest place for someone else to heal." Those words settled over the group like gentle rain. Daniel lowered his head. For years he had believed strength meant hiding pain from everyone around him. Now he realized his mother had lived differently. She had transformed sorrow into shelter for others. Gabriel continued. She never wanted anyone to build legends around her. She wanted ordinary acts of mercy to become contagious. Every life she touched was meant to become another light for someone else. He handed the letter to Elena. With careful hands, she unfolded the pages. "My precious children," it began, "if these words have reached you, then something more beautiful than certainty has already happened. You chose reconciliation before you knew what reward awaited you." Elena swallowed hard. The letter did not contain predictions or impossible promises. Instead, it revealed something far more challenging. Their mother confessed that throughout her life she had quietly written letters to people carrying invisible burdens: widows, grieving fathers, frightened children, lonely neighbors, forgotten friends. She believed that written hope could arrive long after the writer was gone. "You have found only a small portion," the letter explained. "Many more remain undelivered." Daniel looked toward the cedar chest. "So all of these?" Gabriel nodded. "There are dozens." The caretaker stepped forward. "Your mother believed encouragement should outlive the one who offered it." For a long moment, no one spoke. The discovery carried unexpected weight. Their mother's greatest inheritance was not hidden wealth, family secrets, or extraordinary power. It was unfinished kindness. Then Sophia quietly reached into the chest once more. Near the bottom rested a folded map. Unlike the letters, it bore no name. Only one sentence was written across the top. "Where compassion begins again." The map pointed toward a forgotten village several miles beyond the monastery. Gabriel recognized it immediately. "I haven't been there in years." "What is it?" Elena asked. He answered slowly. "That village is where many of the people your mother helped first began rebuilding their lives." The caretaker's expression grew thoughtful. "Some of them still gather every July." "Why?" Daniel asked. "To honor someone they believed would never receive thanks." A deep silence followed. Their mother had never mentioned any of this. Not once. As twilight settled over the hills, the group decided to follow the map before darkness fully arrived. The narrow path led through olive groves, across a small stone bridge, and into a peaceful valley where warm lights flickered from cottage windows. They expected an empty memorial. Instead, they found an entire community waiting. Candles illuminated a modest courtyard filled with families of every age. Children laughed near a fountain. Elderly couples embraced. Neighbors shared bread around long wooden tables. None of them knew Elena or Daniel. But the moment Gabriel appeared, smiles spread through the crowd. One by one, people approached carrying old envelopes. Each envelope bore the same familiar handwriting. "Your mother's." A woman explained how one letter had given her hope after losing her husband. An elderly man described reading another during the darkest season of his life. A young teacher admitted she had chosen her profession because of a message written years earlier by a woman she had met only once. Every story uncovered another life quietly transformed by simple compassion. Elena felt overwhelmed. She had spent years grieving the absence of her mother, never realizing that pieces of her love were still actively changing lives far beyond their family. As the final speaker stepped away, an elderly priest approached carrying a small wooden box wrapped in linen. "I've been waiting for this evening," he said. He placed the box into Elena's hands. "It was your mother's final request." Inside rested a beautifully carved rosary, worn smooth with years of prayer. Beneath it lay a tiny folded note. Elena opened it carefully. There were only 2 lines. "The greatest miracle was never the answers I received." She unfolded the second half. "It was the person I became while learning to wait." Before anyone could absorb those words, the church bell rang once across the valley. Then again. Then a third time. The priest looked toward the chapel with quiet surprise. No one was scheduled to ring the bell tonight. A young messenger came running up the stone path, breathing hard. He stopped before Gabriel, holding out another sealed envelope. "It arrived just before sunset," he said. "The courier insisted it be opened only if all of you were together." Gabriel stared at the unfamiliar seal. For the first time that evening, uncertainty crossed his face. "This," he whispered, "was not written by your mother." And as Elena looked closer, she realized the handwriting on the front belonged to someone she had believed was lost to history forever. No one reached for the envelope immediately. The evening breeze drifted through the courtyard, carrying the scent of olive branches and fresh bread from the nearby tables. The joyful conversations that had filled the village only moments before now seemed distant, as if the world itself had stepped back to witness whatever would unfold next. Gabriel accepted the envelope with both hands. The wax seal had darkened with age, yet it remained perfectly intact. There was no sender's name, only a single phrase pressed into the wax. "When mercy has completed its journey." His expression softened. "I've seen this seal before," he murmured. "Only once." Elena looked at him with quiet urgency. "Where?" He hesitated, searching memories buried beneath decades. "The day your mother entrusted me with. Her first letter." He carefully broke the seal. Inside rested several handwritten pages and a small pressed white lily that had somehow survived the passing years. The flower had become delicate as parchment, but its shape remained beautiful, preserved by patient hands that believed even fragile things deserved protection. Gabriel unfolded the first page. Instead of reading aloud immediately, he closed his eyes. "I recognize this handwriting," he whispered. "It belongs to Father Thomas." The elderly priest standing nearby suddenly froze. His face lost its color. "That cannot be," he said quietly. "Father Thomas passed away many years ago." Gabriel nodded. "He did." A long silence settled over everyone before he finally began reading. "If this letter reaches Elena and Daniel," the message began, "then your mother's greatest prayer has already been answered, not because every sorrow disappeared, but because love survived what resentment could not." Daniel felt something shift inside him. For years he had searched for reasons behind every painful chapter of his life. Yet these words suggested a different question altogether. Not why suffering had entered, but what love had remained after it passed. The letter continued. Your mother often came to this monastery carrying the names of people she wished to pray for. She almost never asked for herself. She believed the human heart grows strongest when it remembers someone else's burden alongside its own. Elena smiled through tears. That sounded exactly like her. Not extraordinary because she sought attention. Extraordinary because she rarely did. Father Thomas had written page after page describing quiet moments no one else had witnessed. Her mother repairing broken fences for elderly neighbors before sunrise. Leaving food outside homes without revealing who had brought it. Writing encouragement to strangers who believed no one remembered them. Listening far longer than she spoke. Choosing gentleness even when life offered every excuse to become bitter. Daniel lowered his eyes. I spent years thinking I truly knew her. Gabriel rested a hand on his shoulder. You knew her as a son. The elderly priest finished gently. Tonight you're discovering her as the countless people she quietly served knew her. Those words changed something within both siblings. Their grief slowly began transforming into gratitude. Not because they missed her less, but because they could finally see how completely she had spent her life loving others. As Gabriel reached the final page, another folded sheet slipped onto the stone pathway. Unlike the others, this one carried fresh ink. It wasn't decades old. It had been written only days before. The entire group exchanged puzzled glances. Gabriel carefully opened it. There must be some mistake, he whispered. The handwriting was unmistakable. Not their mother's. Not Father Thomas's. It belonged to Sister Maria, the last nun who had cared for the monastery archives. The elderly priest's voice trembled. She left here last week. What does it say? Elena asked. Gabriel read slowly. If you are reading this, then I have already placed the final piece where your mother always hoped it would be found. She asked me never to reveal it until her children had chosen forgiveness without expecting any reward. Daniel looked toward the cedar chest. It isn't in there? No, Gabriel answered. Sister Maria writes that it was never meant to stay here. The note included a simple sketch. It showed the old chapel inside the monastery. But one stone beneath the front kneeler had been marked with a tiny cross. The caretaker immediately recognized it. That stone has never been moved. The group returned beneath the growing night sky. Moonlight poured through the chapel windows, bathing the worn floor in silver light. Everything remained exactly as generations had remembered it. Except for one detail. The kneeler stood slightly forward, as though someone had recently knelt there for a very long time. Together they carefully lifted it aside. The marked stone was heavier than expected. Daniel pressed his hands beneath its edge. With Gabriel's help, it slowly rose. Hidden beneath was a narrow wooden compartment. Inside rested only 3 objects. A simple wooden cross. A small pouch containing seeds. And one final journal wrapped in blue cloth. No jewels. No money. No family fortune. Only things that seemed almost impossibly ordinary. Elena opened the journal. The first pages contained her mother's reflections during the final years of her life. Not fears. Not regrets. Only gratitude. She wrote about sunsets she never wanted to forget. Conversations that restored hope. People who unknowingly answered prayers simply by showing kindness. Near the end of the journal, one sentence stopped Elena completely. The world does not change because a few people perform extraordinary acts. She turned the page. It changes because ordinary people refuse to stop loving when disappointment tells them to. A tear fell onto the paper. Then another folded page slipped from the back cover. Unlike every other letter they had found, this one was addressed not to Elena. Not to Daniel. But simply to the one reading this story. Elena slowly unfolded it. Before she could read the first line aloud, the chapel door creaked open. A cold breeze swept through the sanctuary. Someone had entered. Yet no footsteps followed. Only a calm voice, almost hidden within the silence, quietly asked, "Are you finally ready to discover why your mother believed this message was meant for far more than your family alone?" The voice dissolved into the stillness almost as soon as it had been heard. No figure stepped from the shadows. No dramatic entrance followed. The chapel remained quiet, illuminated only by moonlight pouring through stained glass windows that painted gentle colors across the stone floor. For a brief moment, everyone simply listened. Not for another voice, but for the silence itself. It carried an unusual peace. Gabriel slowly walked toward the open doorway. Outside, the courtyard was empty. The wind moved softly through the olive trees, and somewhere in the distance an owl called into the night. Whoever had spoken had already gone or perhaps had never intended to be seen. He returned with a thoughtful smile. "Some moments aren't meant to answer every question," he said. "Some are meant to awaken one." Elena looked down at the page addressed, "To the one reading this story." She hesitated. "It doesn't belong only to us anymore." The elderly priest nodded. "Then read it the way your mother would have wanted." Elena unfolded the letter carefully. The handwriting remained warm and familiar. "If these words have reached your eyes," it began, "then perhaps you have spent part of your life believing you were waiting for a miracle." She continued reading aloud. "But I have learned something that surprised me. Miracles often arrive quietly. Sometimes they look like an apology offered after years of silence. Sometimes they appear as unexpected courage. Sometimes they begin the moment someone decides that bitterness has taken enough from them." No one interrupted. The message never promised an easy life. Instead, it described hope as something ordinary people choose again and again, especially when giving up would seem easier. Daniel felt those words settle deeply within him. He realized he had spent years searching for one extraordinary event that would erase every painful memory. Instead, healing had begun through countless small decisions. Driving toward the monastery. Opening forgotten letters. Listening instead of defending. Returning instead of running. The miracle had not been a single moment. It had been a journey. Sophia stepped closer. "I think your mom knew something." Elena smiled gently. "What do you think she knew?" The little girl looked around the chapel. "That people remember how they were loved longer than they remember why they were hurt." Her simple observation filled the room with quiet emotion. Even Gabriel found himself blinking away tears. The elderly priest led them toward a side chapel that had remained closed throughout the evening. "I've never shown this room to visitors," he admitted. Inside stood a modest wooden table. Upon it rested dozens of candles, each beside a handwritten card. Every card carried only a first name. No explanations. No stories. Just names. "Who are they?" Daniel asked. The priest smiled. "People your mother prayed for." Elena slowly walked along the table. Some names belonged to neighbors she remembered. Others were completely unfamiliar. One candle had nearly burned to its end. Another looked newly placed. Then Elena noticed something that stopped her. There were 3 empty candle holders. Each had a blank card beside it. The priest quietly explained. "Your mother left instructions." He handed Elena a folded note. "If the day of reconciliation ever came," it read, "invite my children to light the final 3 candles not for the past, but for the people they have not yet met." Daniel looked puzzled. "For strangers?" Gabriel answered softly. "For future acts of kindness." Understanding slowly dawned upon them. Their mother had never intended her legacy to end with remembering what she had done. She hoped someone else would continue it. Together, Elena, Daniel, and Sophia lit the 3 remaining candles. The small flames flickered gently before settling into steady light. No applause followed. No extraordinary sign appeared. Yet something inside each of them felt unmistakably different. Not because they had reached the end of a journey. Because they had accepted the beginning of another. As they prepared to leave the chapel, the caretaker approached carrying a weathered guestbook. "I almost forgot," he said. "There's one final entry you should see." He opened to the last completed page. The signature belonged to Sister Maria. Beneath it she had written, "If they arrive together, tell them to visit the old orchard at sunrise. There is one final promise waiting there." Elena looked up. "I thought tonight was the end." The caretaker smiled kindly. "Your mother never believed love ended with a single conversation." He turned the page. Pressed between the blank sheets was a fresh apple blossom, though the orchard's flowering season had already passed. Attached to it was a tiny ribbon bearing only 5 handwritten words. "The harvest has finally begun." Gabriel gazed toward the dark hills beyond the monastery. "I have a feeling," he said quietly, "that tomorrow morning will reveal the one truth your mother protected more carefully than any letter." Far beyond the chapel, where moonlight silvered the ancient orchard, a solitary lantern suddenly glowed beneath one of the oldest trees as though someone had arrived before them and was already waiting for the first light of dawn. Before the first bird greeted the morning, the monastery grounds were wrapped in a gentle mist. Dawn had not yet painted the sky, and the orchard rested beneath a veil of silver, every branch still, every leaf holding tiny drops of dew that reflected the faintest hint of coming light. Elena woke before anyone called her. She could not explain why. It felt less like waking from sleep and more like responding to a quiet invitation that had been waiting for her heart all night. She stepped outside, finding Daniel already standing near the stone path. Neither of them spoke. After everything they had discovered, words no longer carried every feeling. Sometimes walking beside someone in peace revealed more than conversation ever could. The lantern they had seen from the chapel still glowed beneath the oldest apple tree. As they approached, they found no mysterious stranger waiting. Instead, resting on a weathered wooden table was a basket filled with young apple saplings, each carefully wrapped for planting. Beside them lay a handwritten card. Gabriel lifted it gently. It contained only one sentence. "Fruit is never grown for the tree that bears it." The words lingered in the cool morning air. Daniel slowly smiled. "Our mother wasn't asking us to preserve her memory." Gabriel nodded. "She was asking you to continue her generosity." The caretaker joined them carrying a small shovel polished by years of use. "Every family that has visited this orchard after choosing forgiveness has planted something," he explained. "Not as a ritual. As a reminder that the best things often begin long before anyone sees them." Elena chose the smallest sapling. Its roots looked fragile, almost too delicate to survive. Yet something about it reminded her of the countless quiet acts described in her mother's letters. None of them had seemed extraordinary in the moment. Together, they had become a forest of hope reaching people she would never meet. The family knelt together beneath the old tree. No speeches. No ceremony. Only grateful hearts placing new life into waiting soil. As Daniel covered the roots with earth, Sophia looked up thoughtfully. "Do you think someone will sit under this tree one day?" Elena smiled warmly. "I hope they do. And they won't even know our names." "No," Elena answered. "But they'll still enjoy the shade." The elderly priest watched them with peaceful eyes. "That," he whispered, "is how love outlives us." As the morning brightened, villagers began arriving one by one. None had been invited. Some carried bread fresh from their ovens. Others brought flowers, blankets, or baskets of fruit. No one seemed to organize the gathering. It simply happened. Gabriel looked around in amazement. "Your mother used to say kindness has a memory of its own." Soon laughter filled the orchard. Children chased butterflies between the trees while older neighbors exchanged stories they had not shared in years. The atmosphere held no trace of spectacle, only the quiet beauty of people choosing to be present for one another. Then an elderly woman slowly approached Elena. She leaned on a carved wooden cane, her hands weathered by time. "I've carried something for 20 years, she said softly. From her coat pocket she removed a tiny cloth pouch. Inside rested a simple silver ring. "It belonged to your grandmother." Elena stared in astonishment. "My grandmother?" The woman nodded. "She asked me to keep it until your family had learned that forgiveness is an inheritance, not just a decision." Daniel carefully examined the ring. Engraved inside were 4 words. "Always leave room home." The engraving puzzled him. "It doesn't make sense." Gabriel smiled gently. "Look again." Daniel turned the ring toward the sunlight. He realized the engraving had worn away with time. The missing word was almost invisible. Together, the inscription now read, "Always leave room for home." Those words settled into every heart present. Home was never merely a building. It was the place where mercy was welcomed back. As Elena slipped the ring onto her finger, the elderly woman reached into her bag one final time. She unfolded a faded drawing made in colored pencil. It showed the monastery, the orchard, and one additional building that no longer stood. "What is this?" Sophia asked. The caretaker's face became unexpectedly emotional. "That," he whispered, "was the house of welcome. It burned down many years ago." Gabriel studied the drawing carefully. Then his eyes widened. It wasn't destroyed completely. Everyone turned toward him. "What do you mean?" He pointed toward the hills beyond the orchard. "The foundation still exists." The caretaker slowly nodded. "I had almost forgotten." Gabriel looked from Elena to Daniel. "Your mother dreamed of rebuilding it someday." Silence followed. Not the silence of uncertainty. The silence that appears when a purpose quietly enters the room. Before anyone could speak, a young messenger came running up the orchard path, breathless but smiling. He carried a folded newspaper from the nearby town. "There is something you need to see," he said. Across the front page was a photograph taken only hours earlier. It showed the orchard at sunrise. But none of them had seen a photographer. Beneath the image was a headline that made every heart pause. "A forgotten promise awakens after 20 years." And in the corner of that photograph, standing beneath the oldest apple tree where no one remembered seeing anyone at all, was the unmistakable silhouette of a woman whose gentle smile looked astonishingly like the one Elena had carried in her memories since childhood. Elena held the newspaper with trembling hands, studying the photograph again and again. The figure beneath the oldest apple tree seemed unmistakably familiar, yet no one remembered seeing her there that morning. Gabriel looked closely before offering a gentle smile. "Sometimes," he said quietly, "a photograph captures more than a face. It captures what a heart is finally ready to remember." The elderly priest nodded in agreement. "Whether that silhouette is exactly who you think it is matters less than what it awakened inside all of you." Elena lowered the paper. He was right. For the first time since losing her mother, she was no longer searching for one more sign, one more explanation, or one more impossible conversation. She realized the greatest gift she had received was not another mystery to solve. It was the certainty that love had never truly disappeared. It had simply continued its work through every life her mother had touched. Daniel stepped toward the foundation of the old house of welcome. Time had left only weathered stones covered with grass and wildflowers, yet standing there, he could almost imagine the laughter that once filled the place. He turned toward his sister. "I spent years believing I had lost my purpose." Elena smiled. "You didn't lose it." She glanced around at the villagers gathering together, at Sophia laughing beneath the young apple sapling they had planted, at Gabriel speaking with neighbors whose lives had quietly crossed his own. "You were walking toward it all along." Those words settled over Daniel with unexpected peace. He finally understood that the years he had considered wasted had shaped him into someone capable of serving others with humility. Even his regrets had become teachers, preparing him to offer compassion without judgment. The villagers gathered in a wide circle. No one had planned a ceremony. No one stood at the center. Instead, each person shared one memory of kindness that had changed the direction of their life. Some stories were small a meal left at a doorstep, a handwritten note during a difficult season, a stranger who listened without rushing away. Others were life-changing. Together they revealed the same quiet truth. Love rarely announces itself with greatness. More often,